I feel like anytime we want to record this episode, which has now been planned for like
Month.
3 weeks, a month, like maybe longer, every time we go to record it or we wait another week to record it, something new happens. And it's like we literally cannot keep up with the global affairs. And I hate, like, I'm not making a joke. I'm not making a joke of what's happening. It is not a laughing matter. It's just a very scary matter. And I, for one, am finding it very difficult to like cope and keep up with every single time there's like a new thing that happens when I'm just trying to like wrap my head around the previous thing.
I think that's good. It's a lot. It literally is a lot. And I feel like for the last, I don't know, few episodes that we've recorded, that's how we've started, is that it's a lot.
It's a lot.
There's a lot happening. It feels like the world is on fire more than ever. And every time we go to like digest one thing, something else, like some other traumatic event happens.
Yeah.
And it's like you're pressing restart and you're just adding to the weight. So I feel very heavy.
Yeah, exactly. And I think like, one of the earlier episodes that we had was about, I mean, literally, I'm like trying to remember because we like really just went on this like quick little hiatus. We're like, bye, mid-season break, but it's not a season. But like I remember one of the last ones that we recorded where we were kind of just talking about engaging and like maybe taking a break to like be able to engage in a more productive way or just be more productive with like how you are consuming what's going on. Um, and I think I like semi want to like recant my statement or not recant my statement, but just like alter it because I think that when so many things are constantly happening, there is actually no right or like productive way to deal with it because none of the things that are happening are productive. Like there's no reason for them. I mean, the reason is like bigotry and racism and homophobia and all of that. But there's no productive reason for them happening.
Yeah.
And so I just think that dealing with it, you just do whatever. Like whether you're like us and you're like, you know what, I am going to reflect on it on my own. I'm going to pause. Like nobody needs to know my thoughts and opinions on this. I will just wait next week to record this episode. Or if you are constantly posting things on Instagram or you're not or whatever. I think it's like a really heavy time. When we had first talked about recording this episode, it was when everything was at the height. I mean, it still is at the height of everything happening in Palestine.
Yep.
Um, and it was just coming off of the like wave of everything that was happening in like India or Kashmir or with the like coronavirus in general. Um, and then and there's just been so many things since,
Yeah.
and
And
they are
specifically home, like we talk a lot about the states, but specifically what has made the news are things that are happening at home.
yeah, exactly. There's specifically things that have been happening at home. Exactly. There are also things that are all tied together. Like every time it happens, it's like another like notch on the belt that is like the underlying systemic racism, that is like the underlying systemic homophobia, or just oppression of marginalized communities overall. And I think, like I think a lot of times one of the arguments that like the right wing uses is like, oh, well, like it's like nobody can take a joke anymore. Like nobody can, like everything is political, da da da. But it truly is. Everything is literally political because everything is connected, and all of those reasons that those things are connected is why these things continue to happen. And like that was such a vague sentence. Like that was literally the most vague sentence. But it's the same idea of colonization that just gets replayed over and over and over and over and over again. And who thinks they deserve to be in power through colonization over and over and over and over again, whether that's through what is happening in Kashmir, whether that's what's happening in Palestine, whether that is the 215 indigenous children that were murdered, that were their remains were found, whether that is the Muslim family that was killed. Like, it's the same structures of oppression that uphold one and allow one to happen, that uphold the other and allow the other to happen.
Yep.
And so it's just, it's not that everything is, it's not that everything is more political now than it was before. It's just, it's like a sheer abundance in the worst way of everything that's been happening.
It is all the um, dangerous impacts of white supremacy and white power.
Yeah.
These events are not mutually exclusive. I think like that's something too that I'm not that I'm trying to wrap my head around, but I'm trying to digest, because there are big structural systems, for lack of a better word. I feel like we always use the word systems, but that's literally what it is.
Yeah.
It's this like infrastructure that's in place that
Yeah.
allows for these things to happen, and it like seeps into our everyday in
Yeah.
ways that you might not know. So for example, when we talk about most recently, like the murder of the Muslim family in London, Ontario, you know, the murder was based off, like, the person who killed this family grew up on this anti-Muslim rhetoric. And it's because of things he watches on TV, the conversations that happen back home, the conversations that happen with his family. And so it's just, it's so intertwined that that in itself is overwhelming and frustrating at the same time.
Yeah. And it's so, I feel like deeply entrenched in like every single thing. So, like, for example, one of the things you mentioned is movies. Like, every North American movie, it shows Muslim people and brown people, first of all, as being synonymous, which they're
Mhm.
not. And, but what, like, the reason that that's important is because it's literally identity erasure, because every brown person is not Muslim, every Muslim person is not brown.
Yes.
Um, and two, what it like, it's like this trope. It's like this trope of like this brown Muslim person, whether it's like a cab driver, whether it's working at the 7-Eleven, how they speak, what they represent, like who they actually are. And so I think, and all that does is like reinforce those stereotypes about brown and Muslim people, which somebody who is not thinking analytically or is not questioning what they're watching is just like is making all synonymous. But then also the way,
And sorry, not all Arab people are Muslim the same way that not all Muslim people are Arab. Like, this is
there
all
you go.
intertwined.
Exactly. But that is also further identity erasure, which is also a facet of colonialism and colonization. Um, and like it's like all of the structures that come together that like allow these things to happen. The fact that like in when you read books about and you look literally at the words that are used to describe people from the West versus from the East,
Yeah.
or education and how they teach you about the West versus the East. It's just, you like, it's so deeply a part of every single like structure and system that you like come to play with every single day. It's really, really hard to, it's like very overwhelming because you don't know where to start to like uproot this problem or even identify it or even like pinpoint where to like, from where do we go? Is it education? Is it media? Is it conversation? Is it sharing on Instagram? Like, what is it? And what truly is going to make an impact?
I feel like that's literally the question that we are struggling to answer. Like, I feel like a lot of emphasis is put on social media, but social media is, I also feel like I need to like retract some of my statements from our last episode. Social media is a very powerful tool and has been used effectively in the last few weeks.
Yeah.
Um, Especially when we talk about when we talk about Palestine, like, it's been really instrumental in educating people and bringing
Yeah.
awareness to what's going on. but it is so short term. Like people's attention span on there is minuscule. And like as we can see now, you know, it's very much a trend.
Yeah.
And I hate that. I really hate that. And so I feel like I I think that the best thing to do, I honestly like should take my own advice, and I think it's just undoing a lot of the policies that are currently in place that continue to promote
Yeah.
modern colonization,
Yeah.
modern settlerism, things that foreign aid to governments that we shouldn't be providing foreign aid to, conditional aid, like things that our members of parliament vote on, in turn, who we vote in office. I think that that's one of the best places we can start. And then
Yeah.
from there, it's really hand in hand with everything else. Like I think that like I don't think that one person can do it all,
Yeah.
but I think that if we each sort of take on one thing, then it will help.
I think we always talk about like voting, like power of
Taking
the
it to the
people.
poll.
That's literally why, like, that's what I think about, because we're always like power of the people. But it's
Yeah.
true. And I think like, one of the things that we've said often about the government in Canada is that they campaign on the left, but they um
Govern on the
govern on the right. Exactly.
center, more on the right. Yeah.
I was like, one of the things we say, and then I literally forgot what we said. Good, cool. No, but it's true. Like that is what we say, even though I did temporarily forget it. And it's like it's really hard because I think what that says to me is, and the Liberal Party is obviously in power right now
Yeah.
in Canada. And so what that says to me, the fact that they were voted in, is that people are becoming more inclined to take it to the polls, like to go to the polls with
Take it to the
with what they think, like with what they think, and like with their ideologies. And I think that's important. I just think it's really hard when you have a government, and by no means is our government the best or the worst,
Mhm.
because there are much better versions, and there are much worse versions.
100%.
um but like it's just difficult because it's really hard to have a government where they say one thing and they do another. And it's like very slight, and it's like very like behind the scenes, and it's like entrenched in like the vocabulary that they use, or how they talk about certain things, that like
Mhm.
at the front of it it seems like, oh, everything's fine. But I think that is a problem that's just kind of pervasive throughout, and is actually a way that colonization continues to be reproduced in different systems of structure, um, or different structures of power rather, throughout like the world. So like, even if, for example, if we look at what's happening in Kashmir, um, India was colonized by the British, but India is now colonizing Kashmir.
Mhm.
And it's like literally how it's like this cycle of abuse and trauma. And like that sounds like so intense, but like that truly is what it is, because they were colonized, and it's like as if they don't know anything else, so now they're just doing it again.
Yeah.
And like, again, I say this all the time, I'm always wary to speak about like India or the East in general, because it gets turned into a monolith for the entirety of anything that is not North America, and that's not true. um but yeah, it's like really how all of these systems continue to get reproduced, and they're all the reason why like all of these tragedies continue to happen, and are like state sanctioned violence. Like that really is what it is at the end of the day. Every single one of these occurrences is state sanctioned violence, because at the end of the day, like our government, our policies are not taking the steps to prevent this from happening. They're just taking the steps to like be it's like a reactive versus a proactive approach.
Yeah. I saw this thing online and it was like Canada would never admit to what it is happening in Palestine is like colonization or apartheid, because they would be forced to admit the same is happening in their own country. Like they would be forced to admit that they themselves are colonizers and are continuing to do it.
Exactly.
It's very, I think one of the biggest challenges is how you can maintain people's engagement. You and I are just like I was gonna say we're naturally very
Yeah.
engaged with this stuff, and it's true. Like we do talk about it a lot, even off of our podcast offline, as we
Yeah.
say. Um, but I think that's the biggest challenge. Not a lot of people are as engaged in what our government is doing and in
Yeah,
our day to day.
totally. And I think too, like a lot of people are engaged in like a way that's convenient to them, by which I mean they'll like post something about it on Instagram, but they like maybe don't take the step further to realize how those things like I don't know, like if you post about, say, for example, this Muslim family that was killed, but then you continue to vote for people who are not going to take the actual steps needed to make sure that this doesn't happen again and to condone or who continue to condone this behavior, then like it's it's like you're only halfway there.
It's just scratching the surface. I
Yeah.
totally agree. I
Yeah.
find too it's hard for people to be, and I think we said this last time, but it's hard, again, I pause. It seems like it's hard for people to be empathetic to something that has nothing to do with them, but
Yeah.
also they just have no connection to.
Yeah, and I think it's also hard for people to like put two and two together. Like I think
Yeah.
oftentimes they they won't recognize what's happening close to home as something that's happening elsewhere in the world, because it's like the way that the media like sensationalizes things that happen outside of North America versus how they sensationalize things that happen in North America.
Yeah.
And so like we also, I think, in that vein, have to talk about like the role that media plays. Like we talk a lot about the role that social media plays, but there's like an extra step of the role that media in itself plays with how they talk about things, and how they're, how reporting is done, and like the powers that are at play when it comes to media. And I think that's really hard too, because when you are not able to get access to reliable information, then it's like, really, what do you know?
Yeah.
Right? And like even
Yeah.
if you were to seek that information out yourself, it's not available. And I think that's like one of the things that governments around the world have been doing in trying to limit the amount of information that is released about them, and in trying to change the narrative about what it's like to actually have them in power. And so I think it just gets like reproduced in like so many ways, and it's like you can draw parallels between so many different things. Like, we like the way that, for example, the way that the East is or not sensationalized, but the way that tragedy in the East is looked at,
Mm.
um and like the role that the media plays in upholding that is the same role that the media played in, for example, covering up everything that Harvey Weinstein did. And like you can literally see the parallels in the two because of the way that the media was controlled, and like who is allowed to do what, and what type of person, as in a wealthy straight white cis male versus brown people in the other
Yeah.
part of the world. And so that's like what I mean when I say all of these things are interconnected, and every single tragedy is not, and every single like truly like bad thing that happens, like it's not like a one-off occurrence. It's not like oh well, that happened and that was like so random that happened. It's like, nope, like this is all because we as a community and you as leaders continue to like allow to happen.
Hmm.
And so it's really difficult. It's like very discouraging, because again, it's like, well, where do you start?
Yeah. I completely agree. I completely agree. And then you can say too that everything that's happening is also a link to what we saw happen last summer and continues to happen when we talk about anti-black racism, anti-Asian racism. Like it's
Yeah,
just
exactly.
all connected, and
Yeah.
those at the top, it's white supremacy. Like that is like the lead,
Yeah.
it's like the lead.
That's like the theme of the world, white
Yeah.
supremacy. It's like literally every single thing that happens is like, this sounds intense, but like it's not wrong. Every single thing that happens in the world is because of white supremacy. Like every bad thing and the reason that there is racism, that there is homophobia, all like any type of oppression is because of white supremacy. And like
And nationalism. Yes, why should white nationalism?
whiteness is centered at and through every single community or systemic or structural thing are our
Yeah.
favorite words. System and structure are number 2 favorite words.
Global affairs.
Global affairs is number 3. But it's true. And like, and it's so pervasive. And I think people just don't recognize how deep it goes, but it is really in the center of every single thing. And like, I don't know, like I like think so much sometimes about how these decisions that were made so long ago continue to impact the world today. And it's like very scary. It's like it's very real. It's very scary. And I think that we continue to see it. And then we literally continue to like, not even ignore it, but like allow it to happen. It's like every, like, and this sounds again intense, but every single person is complicit in it. Because every single person, for example, us, enjoy the benefits of it by like living in Canada.
Yeah.
Or like continue to be to whatever, to like continue to take advantage of those benefits because we continue to live in Canada. And it's just really difficult because it's so hard to like extricate, if that's even the right word, the two. And you really can. And it just makes everything really bleak. And it's like something that I think about with my job all the time because I work for like a large corporation and I'm like, this capitalist society, blah, blah, blah. But like that thing that I sent you or that I was talking to you about yesterday, where this person was like, you are a worker, like the person who has the ability to like take away your house, take away your food, like take away your children because you like don't make a payment on time or because you don't satisfy some like arbitrary rule that they have put in place so that you don't satisfy it, are the real capitalists of the world. Like you are not a capitalist. Like that, like capitalism is just a type of economy, like, but commerce and like government and all of those things have existed long before capitalism came to be. And I thought that was so interesting because it is really easy to just like get bogged down and be like, talking about like not being able to do anything, everything is connected. It's like, well, you are not like, I am not capitalism. Like, you know what I mean? It's like, I don't have the power to like do those things.
Yeah. I remember you sent that to me and it like really sat with me because we both were like,
we're like,
this capitalism. Yeah, we're like, I'm just gonna go back to my 9 to 5.
Yeah, we're like, fuck capitalism. Happy Tuesday. Please find the cash. Literally, that's us. We're like texting each other. We're like, I fucking hate corporations. Like, corporate culture is trash. We're like, let's take this offline. Let's circle back. Like every freaking like corporate jargon like ever.
Because, well, you know what? Like, what you were saying about people, everybody is complicit, and it's true. Like, it's a very uncomfortable thought to come to terms with, that in amidst the world being on fire, that you play a role in it. Like, it is a very cool thing to think about. And I also just like reflecting on after when they announced that those Indigenous graves were found in that residential school, like it really does make you reflect back. And even just as an immigrant, as hard as it is, like coming to Canada in search for a better life, I am still complicit. I am still complicit because I am gaining the benefits of this better life at the expense of stolen land.
Yeah, at the continued expense. Yeah, and I think about that too. And like that's one of the conversations that we had, and like is kind of one of the things that we were saying earlier, where like colonization is unfortunately reproduced over and over again, even through people like us who might be aware of it. But then we come here, I didn't have a Canadian accent before, but I do now.
Yeah.
You didn't either, but you do now. we assimilated the way we dress, the way we talk, our cultural like references, whatever. And it's obviously a form of survival and like, okay, but then that also speaks to how a person and a child who is literally just learning from around them feels that they can be safe in this environment. And that's literally to assimilate. And it's just hard because then in turn, like you tell future immigrant kids that are coming in, okay, well, you have to assimilate like me. Like I'm just an Indian kid in school. Okay, I assimilate. A new Indian kid comes, they're going to be like, okay, well, she's assimilated. So like now I have to do it too. And like
Mm.
it works the other way too. Like I know at my work, like I often wear Indian clothes to work because I like to, and they're just like the most comfortable, especially in the summertime. And one of the girls was like, I love that you wear traditional Indian clothes and it makes me feel like I can wear them too.
Oh, yeah.
Which is great, but it's like I wasn't always like that. Like, you
Yeah.
know, and it's because somebody did it before me that I'm able to do it. And so it's just so hard because like but at the same time like I have a Canadian accent and I can like speak to all of the Canadian North American experiences and like
Yeah.
and it's really hard because you do in some way shape or form like reproduce that and like you know like you often talk about your hair like your hair was a big thing where you felt like that was a way for you to reconnect to your identity and like you used to straighten it for like a really long
Do
time.
you fucking remember?
Yeah,
Every day.
of course.
I would
even
be like 2 hours.
even Christina like we didn't know Christina had curly hair and her hair is literally as curly as yours, you know this, until like third year. And we were like, I've known you for so many years. Like, why I didn't even know that you had curly hair. And she was like, yeah, I just straightened it. And I mean, hers was not a thing of like coming in to her identity or like building that connection with her identity. But what it was another form of like assimilation because people in the West have straight hair. Like,
Yeah.
you don't really have like natural hair or like really curly hair or coily hair. And then it like goes through everything because then it's like beauty standards, then it's like how you want to look like and it's that's what I mean when I say it's so deeply entrenched in everything. And then even if you look at say Bollywood, like if you look at who or what is considered beautiful, it is largely influenced by Western standards of ideals of beauty and Western standards of beauty.
And
So it's just like
colorism is huge.
colorism is huge. So it's like so hard because it's like, where do you start? Like, where do you start? Because it is so deeply entrenched in ingrained in every single thing. And then you're like, I don't want to say you're a part of the system that continues to allow these tragedies to happen, whether it's like the oppression of marginalized communities, whether it's like continued Islamophobia or homophobia or racism, but it's just difficult because like you do to some extent enjoy the privileges and benefits of it.
Yeah. How do we like how not that I think we should figure this out
I
right here,
know,
right
we're
now,
like,
but we should
listen
figure
to me.
I'm like, but let's figure it out
No,
right here, right now. What are the next steps? What are the actionables? Let's circle back on this. Let's take this offline. Let's follow up all the corporate jargon to ever
yeah,
exist.
let's
Let's
do it
throw
all.
it in this episode. But really, like I think you just asked a good question. Like, where do we go from here? Because it's easy to just sit and be overwhelmed and put a pause, like literally like
Yeah.
stop everything, because that's what we've both been doing. But at some point, like after you sit with it and you digest it, there needs to be how do we move forward?
Do you have like if you were gonna tell me, like please by all means.
I think okay. I think one, acknowledgement is huge. Like
Yeah.
what we were just saying, that I benefit from the continued XYZ is a huge
More
first,
corporate jargon. Yeah.
more corporate jargon. And then I think that little step will shift your perspective in certain things.
Yeah.
Question the media. Like always, always question the media, even if the media is like
Pandering
a
to what you're saying.
yeah.
But I think your first point is actually really interesting because I think that when you acknowledge or identify it to begin with, that
Mhm.
is such a mindset
Yeah.
change. Like, and it actually is a mindset change. Like, it's like it like clicks in your mind, and then you just think about that thing differently. And I feel like, yeah, that's like a really big first step.
It also dismantles any, like, discomfort you might have with it and any weight that because I think okay, I think there's a lot of emotion on social media and rightly so, like, there's just a lot going on, and sometimes that anger that people feel and their frustration out of, like, the system can be misinterpreted, and so sometimes it I think the best thing to do is to just take a step back, recognize it for yourself, recognize the role that you play, but also that do you know what I'm trying to say? Like,
Yeah,
it's
it like
it's n
it's because I think what you're trying to say, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that like by acknowledging it, you're doing the first step of like taking down the barrier and being like, well, not me, like that doesn't affect me, like it's fine, bye. Because I
Yes,
think like
exactly.
that shame or that guilt or the weight of like understanding or recognizing that you too participate in this is a big reason that keeps people away from ever making a change.
Exactly.
And
That's
so
actually exactly what it is.
like acknowledging it right away is like, okay, I acknowledge it. I'm not going to judge myself, but like, what do I do now?
Yes,
And I think, or even if you go through the steps of judging yourself or denying it, and then finally coming to the conclusion that, well, no, actually, I am a part of it, it's still a change and it's still an acknowledgement towards a change you can make.
yeah, and then that shift in perspective, I think will come out in different ways. So, like, we were just talking about the media. I think you will find that you're questioning the media. If you're talking
Or
about,
questioning what,
the
like
media
you're
is
questioning just the media, but you're also questioning, like, where am I getting this information from?
yeah,
Like, where's,
100%.
yeah.
Start, I will say, because there's, like, legit with all the global affairs, I would say start with what's happening here.
Yeah, I think that's a big thing. Like, I think when people talk about like, I'm gonna go like help build houses in Africa for underprivileged kids, I'm like, there's like literally reserves and communities of indigenous people in your
Yeah.
backyard who are dying. So that's cool.
Yeah, I would and like we've talked about that too. Like those like volun trips are super performative. But I think that like start here because like we said everything is interconnected. And if you start here and then branch out to how we play a role as a country in
Yeah.
foreign affairs, global affairs,
Our favorite affairs.
you'll see the resemblance. Like you'll see what we're talking about when and that was a sick word. You'll see what we're talking about in terms of like everything is connected and how we play a role.
Yeah. And then hopefully it'll inspire you to make a change.
Yeah. And then take it to the polls.
Take power to the people, stop racism, take it to the polls.